There's something happening in the world right now that many people didn't see coming. For decades, the story of global power was written in predictable lines. It was the West that set the rules. It was America that defined innovation. It was Europe that shaped diplomacy. And the rest of the world, the so-called developing nations, were expected to follow the script written for them. But that story is changing, and at the heart of that change stands one nation, India. For a long time, India was underestimated, seen as a country of contradictions, vibrant democracy, yet burdened with poverty, technological genius, yet struggling with infrastructure, spiritual depth, yet grappling with modern complexity. But beneath those contradictions, there was a quiet confidence building, a conviction that India didn't need to copy anyone's model to succeed. It only needed to rediscover its own. When we talk about outsmarting, we're not talking about deception. We're talking about vision. We're talking about a kind of intelligence that blends patience with precision, humility with ambition, and faith with pragmatism. That's what India is demonstrating today. A long game, one that doesn't rely on domination but on reinvention. Let's start with the digital revolution. When the world talks about technology, the first names that come to mind are often Silicon Valley giants, Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon. But in the past decade, something extraordinary has happened in India. A country once seen as a land of software outsourcing is now building digital ecosystems that are rewriting the playbook of development. Take the Aadhaar system, a biometric identification network that's connected over 1 billion people. No nation, not even the United States, has achieved such a scale of digital inclusion. Then there's UPI, the Unified Payments Interface, a platform that turned every smartphone into a wallet. It didn't just change how Indians paid, it changed how the world thought about fintech. In 2024 alone, India processed more digital transactions than the US, China, and Europe combined. That's not just technology, that's sovereignty. Because in today's world, whoever controls data controls destiny. India didn't wait for Silicon Valley to hand it the tools. It built its own. It didn't let private corporations decide how billions would transact. It made sure those systems were public, secure, and accountable. That's not imitation. That's innovation born out of necessity. While other nations debate about data privacy, India created a model where transparency and trust walk hand in hand. While others speak about digital divides, India quietly built bridges across them. And when the world wondered if democracy could ever coexist with digital efficiency, India proved that it can, if the intent is right. But this story isn't just about technology. It's about strategy, the art of balancing ambition with wisdom. For much of the 20th century, geopolitics was a chessboard dominated by superpowers. Every move by smaller nations was calculated in relation to the US, the Soviet Union, or China. But India has chosen to play a different game altogether. It has learned the art of being friendly without being dependent, assertive without being aggressive, and open without being naïve. Look at how India manages its foreign relations. It buys oil from Russia, partners with America on defense, trades with Europe, and builds infrastructure with Japan, all while standing firm on its own principles. That's not confusion, that's calibration. That's the kind of diplomacy that comes from a deep understanding of balance, a recognition that the world isn't divided into allies and enemies, but into interests and values. While others chase dominance, India is building partnerships. While others rely on hard power, India is mastering soft power. Its movies reach more homes than Hollywood. Its technology powers startups across continents. Its medicine saves lives in the poorest corners of Africa. And its democracy, for all its imperfections, still remains one of the most vibrant examples of pluralism in the modern world. This is what outsmarting looks like in the 21st century. Not through confrontation, but through contribution. Not by shouting louder, but by standing firmer. Not by claiming superiority, but by proving substance. Now, let's talk about something the world often misunderstands: India's patience. For decades, many global analysts mistook India's patience for passivity. They thought its reluctance to intervene meant weakness. They mistook its debates for indecision. But that's because they didn't understand that India doesn't rush history. It shapes it. When other countries react, India reflects. When others build walls, India builds relationships. When others fear change, India learns to adapt to it. That's how it's been for thousands of years. That's how a civilization survives invasions, colonization, and economic transformation, not by fighting every battle, but by choosing which ones matter most. And today, that same patience is what allows India to navigate the complexities of global politics. Whether it's maintaining peace in the Indo-Pacific, balancing ties between East and West, or standing firm on its border policies, India plays the long game. Consider energy policy. While the West debates renewable targets, India is quietly becoming one of the largest producers of solar energy. While others criticize its oil imports, India is building the infrastructure that will make it the clean energy leader of tomorrow. In 2025, India's renewable capacity is set to overtake most European nations. And the secret to that success: scale, strategy, and self-belief. That's the lesson here. Outsmarting doesn't mean overpowering. It means outlasting. It means outthinking. It means doing the hard, unglamorous work of building systems that endure, not speeches that impress. There's another aspect of this rise: the rise of human capital. India's greatest export isn't its goods or its software or even its satellites. It's its people: the engineers, doctors, scientists, teachers, thinkers, and dreamers who have left their mark across every corner of the planet, from the heads of major global corporations to the innovators shaping artificial intelligence. Indian minds are everywhere. But here's the twist: India isn't just exporting talent anymore, it's bringing that talent home. The same professionals who once left for better opportunities are now returning, not out of nostalgia, but because they see something changing. They see confidence. They see potential. They see a nation ready to lead, not follow. That's what transformation looks like when the flow of opportunity starts to reverse. When you build an economy not just for consumption, but for creation. When education is no longer about survival, but about contribution. When you invest not in short-term wins, but in long-term capability. And perhaps most importantly, when leadership learns that humility and confidence can coexist, that you can project strength without arrogance, and extend friendship without submission. In a world increasingly divided between those who seek control and those who seek cooperation, India's story offers something new: a middle path, a way of leading that doesn't rely on fear but on faith, a model that doesn't demand imitation but inspires adaptation. Now, let's be honest, India still faces immense challenges. Poverty, inequality, infrastructure gaps, and environmental concerns remain real. But here's the difference: India doesn't deny its challenges. It confronts them. It debates them. It wrestles with them in the open, in the press, in the parliament, in the streets. That's democracy at work. You see, greatness isn't the absence of struggle. It's the persistence through it. And that's what India understands better than most. Every setback becomes a lesson. Every criticism becomes fuel. Every obstacle becomes a test of will. And as we stand here today, the world is beginning to realize something profound. India's rise isn't an accident. It's the result of vision, endurance, and belief in something bigger than ambition, belief in purpose. Because when a nation starts believing that its destiny isn't written by others, but by its own people, that's when the story changes. That's when power shifts. That's when the future begins to look different. India isn't trying to be the next America. It's trying to be the best version of itself. And that might just be the smartest strategy of all. It's not about catching up. It's about redefining what progress means in the first place. Progress that's not measured by military might alone, but by moral clarity. Not by how much wealth you accumulate, but by how many lives you uplift. Not by the power to intimidate, but by the ability to inspire. In a world desperate for certainty, India offers resilience. In a time dominated by competition, it offers collaboration. And in an age of anxiety, it offers hope. That's how a nation outsmarts the world, not by playing someone else's game, but by creating its own. Diplomacy thrives when principles outlast politics, because principles are the moral compass that guide nations through the tempests of global uncertainty. When political winds shift, principles keep a country steady. They remind leaders that their purpose is not to win the next election, but to safeguard the next generation. Politics can often be a theater of immediacy, built on applause and short-term victories, but diplomacy, true diplomacy, is a discipline of endurance. It demands that nations remember who they are when circumstances test their integrity. Principles are the invisible spine of every credible nation. Without them, diplomacy becomes merely performance. When a nation's diplomacy is grounded in principle, it earns trust, not through words, but through the consistency of its actions. Allies and adversaries alike begin to understand that such a nation cannot be easily swayed by convenience or pressure. Its decisions may not always please everyone, but they will always make sense in the light of its values. The world listens differently to a nation that speaks from conviction, not calculation. It's why some countries, even without vast armies or colossal economies, command immense respect. They stand for something greater than themselves. Politics changes every few years. Principles endure for generations. A political agenda might seek advantage. A principled diplomat seeks balance. The difference between the two defines how the world perceives a nation's maturity. Political victories are measured in votes. Diplomatic victories are measured in trust. And trust cannot be negotiated. It must be earned, nurtured, and protected over time. When politics dictates foreign policy, nations become reactive, bending with the moment's urgency. But when principles guide diplomacy, nations act with vision, shaping the moment rather than being shaped by it. The challenge, of course, is that principles are costly. They often require saying no, when it would be easier to say yes. They require restraint when pride urges retaliation. They require humility to listen when power tempts a nation to dictate. But the nations that survive the test of time are those that have learned to let their values be stronger than their emotions. They recognize that diplomacy built on integrity lasts longer than diplomacy built on impulse. History has shown that the most respected global leaders were those who understood this difference. They realized that while politics rewards the loudest voice, diplomacy rewards the most consistent one. Principles give diplomacy its moral architecture. They transform it from strategy into stewardship. Without them, agreements crumble, alliances fade, and promises lose their meaning. But with them, even fragile understandings can evolve into lasting peace. When principles outlast politics, diplomacy becomes more than a tool of state. It becomes an expression of civilization. It reflects a nation's inner discipline, its moral imagination, and its commitment to something larger than its own interests. This is why the world often looks not just at what a nation achieves, but how it achieves it. Military victories may command attention, but moral consistency commands respect. In today's world, where nations compete for influence through narratives as much as through power, principles are the true differentiator. They are the quiet force that makes others listen when you speak. They make your word mean something. When leaders across the world see that a country's policies are rooted in timeless ethics rather than political expediency, partnerships deepen and dialogues become genuine. Principles transform diplomacy from negotiation into relationship building, from competition into collaboration. The temptation to abandon principles in the face of political pressure is strong. In a world of social media outrage and populist waves, leaders often feel cornered into making short-term gestures. But diplomacy demands patience. It demands that a nation think not in election cycles, but in decades. Political moods are fleeting, diplomatic legacies are not. The diplomats who shape history are not those who react fastest, but those who stand firmest. A principled diplomacy does not mean rigidity. It means clarity. It means knowing the boundaries of compromise. It's about finding common ground without losing moral ground. It's about engaging others with openness, but never at the cost of one's core values. The best diplomats are those who understand that listening is not weakness and empathy is not surrender. They see negotiation not as a contest of dominance, but as an art of alignment, aligning interests without betraying ideals. A nation guided by principle in its foreign affairs can become a stabilizing force in an unstable world. When it speaks, others listen not out of fear, but out of respect. Its voice carries credibility. Its leadership extends beyond geography or military might. In contrast, when politics overtakes principle, diplomacy becomes transactional, and transactions don't build trust. They only delay conflict. The world may tolerate opportunism for a while, but it never honors it. Diplomacy rooted in principle is, in essence, a reflection of a nation's self-respect. It shows that a country believes its word has weight, its promises have permanence, and its values have value beyond convenience. It allows a country to stand firm when others waver, to mediate when others escalate, and to lead when others retreat. That kind of leadership cannot be manufactured. It must be cultivated generation by generation through education, example, and ethical consistency. In the long run, principles outlast politics because they are tied to the human conscience, not to the political calendar. Political leaders come and go, parties rise and fall, but the moral reputation of a nation, its image in the eyes of the world, is cumulative. Every choice, every statement, every agreement adds a brushstroke to that image. When a nation lets its diplomacy reflect its best self, rather than its most convenient self, that image becomes one of strength, steadiness, and sincerity. The greatest challenge for modern diplomacy is not the lack of communication. It is the lack of conviction. Technology allows nations to talk faster than ever, but few listen deeply. Principles remind diplomats that listening is an act of leadership, not submission. They remind leaders that moral courage, the ability to stand by truth, even when it costs something, is the foundation of international credibility. And yet, for all its difficulty, a diplomacy anchored in principle offers something that politics never can: continuity. While politics may divide citizens within a nation, principles unite nations across borders. They become the universal language of cooperation, justice, and peace. Nations that uphold them, even when it's hard, not only earn the respect of others, they also preserve their own sense of purpose. Diplomacy thrives when principles outlast politics because principles make diplomacy human. They keep it from becoming a game of power and turn it into a pursuit of understanding. They ensure that when nations sit across from each other, they don't just represent their interests, they represent their ideals. And in a century where global challenges are too vast for any one country to solve alone, those ideals will matter more than ever before.